Okay, so let me introduce Mike Arduser. Most of you know of Mike's work, and I'm going to ask him to just kind of give a little bit of an overview of what keys he's developed, and Claire will make those available, and they're also available, I believe, through Dan Carr's site and directly from Mike. So, and sorry, Mike, one last thing, and then we're going to dive into Augochlorella, and but first, why don't, Mike, you introduce yourself and talk about your keys and their coverage.
I'm going to make a quick interrupt there. So I did send out the 3 guys we're going to be looking at today. And like 5 minutes ago, I sent out a refresher email of the green bee genus guide that we all made at the very beginning of this class. And it's also in Microsoft Teams. But if you did not get those, as always, shoot me an email and I'll get those to you right away so you can follow along. That's all.
All right, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so I've been working on keys to bees of the Midwest and the Eastern U.S. for some time now. I gradually add more and more. The most current versions are in a zip file on the website that Dan Carr's website that Sam mentioned, and also at the Conservation Research Institute website and CRI. And the important thing is that on those keys up at the top, there's a date, an edited date, and because I'm always messing with them. We use these in our workshops, and people are always finding errors or mentioning word changes. Hopefully they all get better because of the help and the interactions with other people. And some of you out there have probably helped tremendously make these better and more concise. So,
okay,
that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to share my screen at this point so we have access to the microscope, and if we want to look at any of the wording in the keys, I encourage you guys to open up the Augochlorella key if you have it. But really, what we're going to do is we're not going to concentrate on the wording per se. Although Mike, as well as myself and Claire with the Discover Life guides, we're always looking for like, oh, this doesn't make sense. Please clarify, because again, you know, we spend all our time looking at these bees, so we don't necessarily transmit well the information a potentially new person who has never seen any of these, the information that you need to understand differences. And you would think, given how common these green bees are, that this is all pretty set in stone and that everyone has everything clear. But as Mike and I'll sound off a couple times too, there's several new species almost for sure out there, and Mike will bring up, particularly if we get into Augochloropsis, some of the new stuff that we're going to define. But it's a tricky group. So I have a female specimen of Augochlorella aurata here. So maybe Mike, why don't we flip it back and you talk about maybe Augochlorella ID in general in the East. So we have other problems out west into Mexico. We're going to ignore those for now, but just realize it's worse out in those areas. And we will try to bring in more Westerners as we go. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, and is there a visual of Augochlorella on the screen? I don't see it.
Can you see it now? Did I not share? Okay, let me just try this again.
We just see you, Sam.
You just see me. Okay. Oh, I see what I did. I didn't click the secondary thing I had to do. All right, so this is the labral process, which just is a difficult thing to show on the computer screen for Augochlorella aurata. And Mike, I don't know if you use this character very much, but at least in one of the forms of Augochlorella aurata, the labral process is this is as good as I could get this shot, is elongate and almost sausage-like, and in persimillis it's round as a bullet. Do you use that?
I have noticed it, but I've never used it to the extent that you have. So, I mean, I think it's something worth really looking into. I haven't, you know, that's sort of a new one to me. So that's good to know.
Okay, so let me flip this over and we'll get a shot. And if you want to go ahead and talk about just in general Augochlorella aurata issues, and I think it's worthy to talk about a little bit of the past and the trouble that people have splitting out some of the groups.
Yeah, the earliest modern revision, I guess, of Augochlorella was Ellen Ordway's work in 1966. She was a Michener student, and she published a very interesting revision of the North American species. And in it, she had, if I recall right, 4 forms of aurata, which was striated at the time. Can you all hear me? I'm getting a real echo.
Yeah, we're getting an echo now. Do you have more than one?
No, I had to mute somebody.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, so Ellen recognized 4 forms of what she called at the time striata, which we now call aurata. And they were largely based on the features, the structure, the appearance of the propydium. And those of you that have spent any time looking at aurata know that the variation in striations, sculpture of the propydium in aurata is just unlike any other bee I could think of. I mean, it's really tremendously variable. Anyway, so she had these 4 forms, and one of them was later elevated to species rank in, I don't know if I pronounced her name right, the second revision, which was in 2004 by Suelo or Coelho. It was in the systematic entomology. She revised Augochlorella again and named a new species, Karankawa, from Texas, which probably also occurs in Oklahoma. So Coelho's work was the last revision, and since then, Lord knows how many individuals of aurata have been collected in bowls. I mean, it's just always seems to be almost the most numerous bee collected in bowls. It's really remarkable, and which means everybody looks at a lot of them, and variation is real. It's tremendous on the propydium, on the scutum. The punctures can be very dense. They can be slightly separated. They can be both. So there's tremendous variation in aurata, and I don't know specifically all the details of. I think it's Corey Sheffield's work on barcoding this thing, but the barcode data is also remarkably variable. So as Sam alluded to early on, seems quite likely that what we're calling aurata is really a complex of species. But we aren't to the point yet, I don't think, that we can totally separate them. I mean, aurata goes all the way into the Great Plains. And so the range is pretty considerable, all the way up to the Canadian border, all the way down to the Gulf Coast, southern Texas. So it's widely distributed, common almost everywhere. And as a result, kind of a perplexing entity. Obviously a very important pollinator, even though it's tiny. It visits just about everything, seemingly, and undoubtedly has a very important role in pollinating certain smaller flowers. We know that for sure. So,
can we confirm the species on the screen right now?
Yeah, so I just put up 2 different specimens, which I would call aurata here, and the first one had quite a wide, so we'll call this the longitudinal length of the the propodial triangle here. So this is the triangle area, roughly triangular shaped, or the dorsal side of it. And a lot of time, and you'll see this in the advice, let's call it, at this point for gratiosa, you compare the longitudinal length here to the scutellum and the metanotum as a relative means of distance. In the previous specimen, the edge was not very crisp. It was a little bit rounded over. Again, sorry for the difficulty in seeing these things sometimes. And this propodial triangle midsection length was much more close to the length of the scutellum than the metanotum. So here you can see in this one, it's pretty skinny. It's about this same length. And if you look at a lot of keys for gratiosa, this could fit that. And this is what we'll talk about here a little bit in terms of gratiosa versus aurata, because this is about the same length of the metanotum. And in gratiosa, theoretically, it's the same or less. And you can see nice crisp line at the edge where it becomes to the rear face, and lots of striations in this particular specimen. Mike, do you have anything else to add on top of that?
No, but another interesting thing about the one, the specimen, at least what I'm seeing right now on the screen, it's the one extreme of the propodial characters. I mean, it's at least what I'm seeing is subcarinate all the way along the dorsal margin, nothing rounded, and very striate. So that's, to me, that's one of the extremes.
Right. And if we were further south in Florida, we might say, oh, that's probably gratiosa, but this was from Maryland.
Right.
So, which also, it could be that gratiosa is in Maryland, but in the kinds of stuff, other material, males and whatnot, and just the confusion as to what gratiosa is, because aurata also co-occurs, at least in terms of what the specimen look and feel is, with gratiosa. I'm a little ambiguous would be a nice way of saying it, about whether I can tell gratiosa from aurata in terms of those specimens. Should I pull up a male specimen, Mike, of aurata, and show them?
Well,
or do you want to go to females?
Yeah, well, let's just stick with females right now. Another, I mean, and again, the version of the key I have might have some characters on it that aren't on yours, but some other features that separate female gratiosa from aurata are on the posterior surface, back surface of the propodium, which is probably going to be hard to get a picture of there. But in general, in aurata, that posterior surface is smooth and isn't wrinkled, doesn't have a lot of rugosity, and in gratiosa it does. So that's that's what it's interesting. I'm not sure what I'm seeing now, but that looks to So it looks to me. Let's see.
So this is it's not quite. So here's the dorsal triangles and the striations still, and this is so here we have T1 of the abdomen, and this is about the best peak I can get.
Okay.
So some of it's in focus, some of it's not here, of the rear face.
Yep. But and that looks wrinkled and sculptured to some extent to me, but it could be. I mean, it's hard to see exactly.
Yeah, this is exactly the problem. Like, I have some gratiosa here that we'll pull up in a second, and it looks very smooth on the propodial face rather than sculptured. And then some of the aurata, like Mike knows, I've been talking about form 1 and form 2. One of the forms is very smooth, and the other is more like this, wrinkled and things. So you can see why we have questions about the boundaries of species IDs in this group.
And when you get out into the Midwest, and then even on the Great Plains, and I know you don't probably have specimens of that stuff from that part of the range. But I mean, it's different again. And so, you know, it's one of those things, for the time being, I think, you know, it's best we all just call it aurata, with recognition that maybe those forms that Ellen Ordway saw decades ago, maybe there's some significance there. So
I'm showing the other specimen I showed earlier, and let's see if we can get into some vision of the rear face there. So you can see it lacks that crisp line that the other one did. I don't know if the light is good enough to see into the rear face there, but there's a fair amount of hair which is reflecting, and it's relatively smooth. Hard to see. I'll pull up do you have other characters on the
something else that at least with the gratiosa specimens that I've looked at, the dorsal surface of the propydium, its median length is not any longer than the median length of the metanotum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we already mention that?
Yes, and
Okay.
And just again, you run into like the whole clade. I've looked at a lot of that Florida stuff, and it's like, okay, I can see everything from almost the size of the scutellum to well below, and everything in between. And it really is annoying. I'll pull up a gratiosa here now. So I'm pulling up a gratiosa. This is from Florida, and you'll see this color is very unique, but it's you know, just it's a red herring, so to speak, because a lot of species that we are really, you know, reasonably confident are species turn bluer if they're metallic green. And they also turn oranger if they have yellow components for some reason.
Now that's a good shot of the narrow surface of the propydium versus the median length of the metanotum. I mean,
so here's a metanotum, and this distance here to here is less than this distance from here to here. And that's how you do a lot of measurement in bees,
right,
is relative to something else rather than trying to actually come up with a measurement, because sizes vary. And this is skinny all along.
Yep,
And doesn't have, it's basically a band with lots. This is my impression. And now,
no, I agree completely.
not taking it to the bank, but lots and lots of striations in between, like much more than a lot of Augochlorella aurata would have. It's highly striate, and
Yes.
that conforms to what I would call a classic gratiosa.
I agree completely. Yeah.
Don't be fooled by the color, because the gratiosa also can be green. But I just wanted to show you what happens in Florida to a lot of things. Now I'm going to see if we can get the rear face. So we can to some extent here, but this rear face, you know, again, this is the problem. Like, I would consider this to be relatively smooth compared to that other aurata, that one type of aurata. It's a little bit difficult to pick out, you know, how much topography that is. It's not mirror-like for sure, but it does have.
Yeah, in this, not to complicate things too much further, but one of the last things I've added to that gratiosa versus aurata distinction is that regarding the posterior surface that you're showing right now, the propydium, its posterior surface sculpture is similar to the lateral surface in gratiosa, but not that way in aurata.
Okay, that's a good comparative thing. So you can't quite see the lateral surface, but as it curves over, it would be over on this side. Let's see if we can take.
That's always hard to see.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is going to show up well or not because of the Yeah, the wings are in the way, but the idea, I think, is well presented.
And that's characteristic of the classic gratiosa, okay? And I don't know, those ones that come up the coast, I haven't seen enough of those to be very confident about that.
I'm going to just throw up another greener one here. And there's one from North Carolina. Let's stick with Florida. Oh, that's purple. Well, I mean, it makes sense to look at North Carolina. This is the sand hills of North Carolina. And let's see if, so here it is, it's green, as are most things in North Carolina. It does start turning blue to some extent there in the Carolinas, but most of the specimens are going to be this green color. Take a look here at the metanotum and propodium. Well, this one could be ambiguous, right? So this just
to me that you know, that's
still in there.
Metanotum and the posterior surface of the propodium are equal.
Yeah.
You know, in length, and generally in aurata that posterior surface of the propodium is longer medially.
Yeah. And it would be more closer to this distance.
Yes, but we're talking subtleties here, obviously. Yeah. So
we have an email question about how often with these kinds of measurements are you using an eyepiece reticle or just kind of doing these comparative like we're doing right now in class?
I'm going to say that I never use a reticle anymore because the problem is that you can get different sizes of the specimen, right? So if you have a big Augochlorella aurata, let's say, and a small one, then the individual measurements are going to be different. And it's usually, in a comparative way, same size, bigger or smaller is usually pretty obvious. I wouldn't have to measure it. Mike, what's
yes,
you're more precise.
I agree, but I often do use either my eyepiece micrometer or a reticle just to convince myself. I don't use that, because after a while looking at these, you start thinking, well, do I really know what am I in outer space? So every now and then I do take measurements just to convince myself that I'm not losing it. But in general, it's like Sam said, that's, if you had to measure every Augochlorella, I mean, you'd never finish. So it gets to be you're eyeballing it. And once you get, see enough of them, I think it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. And the same thing's going to happen when we talk about persimillis versus aurata.
Which is coming up here. I think that the question was more intended as like not comparing like, oh, it must be 2 millimeters or else, but it was comparing the measurement of that particular specimen's body parts to each other to get this like lesser than or equal to or greater than.
Yes.
Not being super stringent about. Well, the guide says it must be between these. And so we have persimillis up right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the a good shot because of the angles here of the rear part of the propodial triangle, so that because that's a good feature to look at in persimillis. But I'm not.
Yeah,
quite...
so persimillis and aurata are the classic species that are confused all the time by just about everybody, including me and Sam. But they are different. The males are clearly different, but the females are too. In general, and we're talking in general, my take on persimillis, which is very common in the Midwest, super common, almost as common as aurata in some circumstances. Oh, that's a good shot. It's generally a little smaller, and we're talking a little smaller, a little different color of golden green.
Yep.
And when you've got 100 aurata and 100 persimillis next to each other, it stands out. But when you've got just one or two individuals, it's maybe a little less so unless you're super familiar with them. But and then persimillis extends less to the north and less to the south than aurata. So
And
there's
less to the east.
and a little bit of range difference.
Yeah.
And is it common in the east?
No. So, for example, Maryland, we have records all the way into the Piedmont, but not into the coastal plain. I have no records for the county I'm in and the refuge and these places where we have thousands and thousands of specimens. And then when you find records there, as you go up to the peak of the Appalachians and the plateau, they're more regular up there, but we're still talking like one out of 50 at most. Okay. And then when you go to the north, they largely drop out, some in Pennsylvania, very few. When you go to the south, then you can pick up more, but still that Appalachian Mountains tends to be the limit, the range limit. Like, I don't know if I've seen any from the coastal plain from the southern states either. So, actually, I do have the range map up here. Let's see if we can flip to it. Where is that? So this is the range map, which is I didn't take out Mike or John Asher's centroids for things. And again, you have a lot of misidentifications. Oh, yeah. So these are state centroids here. That just say, oh, that's North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia has a record. Here's the bulk of the specimens. You can see they're riding the Appalachians. Like, what's going on up here is sparse, but down through West Virginia has a lot. Like, I see them very regularly there. And then when we're in the Midwest here, and Mike doesn't have his specimens up, so I'm sure there's lots more there in Missouri. But you can see
in Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, persimillis is often more common in samples than aurata is.
Yeah, but you're not going to see that. So if we can do that. Let's do add Augochlorella aurata to this same picture, and you'll see that that's not reflected in the specimen collections. Aurata just dominates everything. And I think a lot of this is because of misidentifications. So blue is aurata, and we'll just dive in. And you can see it's basically hiding a lot of the data, and you're not even seeing a lot of the records because of the way the algorithm works there. But if you move in.
And let's be frank, I mean, a lot of data from the last 10 years from graduate studies, I know, has not been uploaded. It just hasn't. And,
yeah.
Which
is a note that we should be telling the audience, just put it up in GBIF. We can put it up directly in Discover Life, but really adding it to GBIF, first of all, it does make it public accessible to everyone. So that may or may not be an issue. On Discover Life, it's hidden, like you can't download the file, but it makes sense to once you have a good set of determinations for a project to put everything up in GBIF. I think. I mean, that's what I'm pushing for the government to do too. We do it. We send our data over there also.
So Sam showed that photo of the rear margin of the propydium, and in general, that's a pretty good way to separate the two. But there are, often specimens that are I may say this, someone else may say that, because it's what is smooth exactly,
Right. So talk about this area right here in detail. Mike, I'll try and focus in a little bit more because of what's going on and what you look for, and I'll tell you what I look for there.
If you look at the central third, the median third of the posterior margin of that propydium, you notice that the striations stop or become very reduced, and there's a smoothish, shiny area. And if we tilted the specimen a little bit forward, you'd see that there isn't a strong carina or sharp edge either separating that smooth area from the posterior face of the propydium. And even though that looks like, Mike, are you kidding me? That is one of the standard ways, and always been one of the standard ways of separating persimillis females from aurata females. Now there are some individuals that are head scratchers,
Yeah.
But I'd say 90% at least of the persimillis are readily separated by that.
It's also, you do have this, this is like the most solid character, I would say. But the sort of more gold brass color to the green, the smaller size.
Yep.
And then I'll show you this. This is the case, I believe, in all the ones I've looked at in persimillis, is they have this round, let's see if I can get it into focus here. This round bullet shape. Again, we have to see if the label process is going to show up here. Oh, there we go. All right, that's probably as good as it gets for a propodial process. This is just, it's a little bit, fuzzing around the edges, but this is just a really nice round raised mound in the middle of it. Whereas in a lot of the Augochlorella auratas, again, I think there's exceptions and that might be related to form. This is more, sausage shaped type of thing instead of this nice round amount. So in my double checking, when I go like, maybe, I look to see if it's got that, that label process.
A couple other things about the head. And before I say this, I got to thank Zach Portman, University of Minnesota bee guy. He and I are working on sort of a review of all the green bees in the Midwest, Augochlorella, Augochlora, Chloropsis. And we've got a manuscript in prep, but it's got a ways to go yet. But something he noticed and pointed out to me, in the difference between persimillis and aurata females. When you look at the apical third or the apical portion of the clypeus, in persimillis, the apical third is generally dark, and in aurata, the apical fourth is dark. And so if you look at that one, there's a good chunk, and it's hard to tell where the apex really is, but so that's another possibility, that's useful character.
So this dark area right there.
Yeah, and that's something Zach has noticed. The other thing is that most of the females of persimillis, there's a slightly less projection of the clypeus below the suborbital line than there is in aurata. And sometimes it's dramatic. I mean, a lot of aurata have there's quite a prominent projection of the clypeus below the suborbital line. And when I look at this, immediately I'd say that's persimillis, because the clypeus is relatively short compared to the suborbital line.
So when Mike talks about suborbital, you take the bottom of the compound eyes and draw a line. This is not the most optimal view, but it's good enough for illustration points.
Yeah.
You draw a line between the two bottoms, and then that allows you to make, again, a relative statement about how much of the clypeus is below or to the, to the front of that line, to give you a sense of length. Like in some species of bees, basically the clypeus is behind the eyes or just parallel to it. In others, it can stick way out, and that gives you, again, a sense of length of face in a way.
Yeah, it's a very useful measure in all kinds of bees. So anyway, so that to me, when I see that being classic persimillis right there. Where's that one from, Sam?
That's from West Virginia. Hampshire
So
County.
we're saying that goes like down the face, not as a mound that goes like up the face, like if you thought like of a Peponapus or something like that.
No, you're talking about a lateral view. We're just saying when you're looking at right angles to the plane of the face, you are one of the characteristics that's useful is like how far does this clypeus project out into space? So how long? It's not so much the length of the head; it's the length of the clypeus itself. And a measure of that is to talk about the proportion that projects below an imaginary line that runs between the bases of the eyes. The measure that you're talking about, that we talk about in Papinapis, is the nature of the mounding of the clypeus itself. In other words, if we looked at it from a lateral view, how humped or domed is the clypeus? This is about a measure of length of the clypeus using the bottom of the compound eyes as a measuring point. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
No, that's what was being clarified.
Okay. All right. Any more female stuff to talk about here? I don't have the one that begins with K that you have out there.
Yeah, Karankawa. And again, that's a largely Texas and probably south central Oklahoma species. It has a long clypeus, much longer than this, extending below the line, and plus a preoccipital carina that's very obvious, which none of the other Augochlorella, at least in the east, have as much of. I mean, they all have a slight one, but Karankawa has a very distinctive preoccipital carina. And I only have a handful of specimens from Texas, but yeah, it's a very distinctive bee. Very,
We'll have to go. Although Jack Neff probably has boxes of those things. Should we look at males now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right. So they are far less variable than the females, which is one of the striking things, at least to me, about this group. I mean, there is some variation, of course, but not to the extent there is in the females. And so usually when you have a male, it's pretty obvious. It's either, persimillis or aurata or gratiosa.
Okay, so
in my experience.
So this is aurata, and this is the rear leg. So here's the tibia. This is the basitarsus, the first tarsal segment here, very long. And the place to look at, and I know of no other feature on the basitarsus, are the length and the pattern to these hairs here.
Yeah.
So Mike, go ahead and talk about the different patterns, and I'll point them.
Yeah, and it depending on how you orient the specimen, you can fool yourself into thinking you're seeing something that's really not there. This is a very good shot that Sam's got lined up here of male aurata. Those hairs are all pretty much the same length, and they're when we look at persimillis, it'll be a little different. The other thing, and sternites are different between the two, and we'll probably look at those in a little bit as well. So when you look at this, these hairs, even though they're not exactly the same, they're pretty much the same length. And persimillis will be a little different. Color of the leg, don't worry about color. In general, it's yellow, those segments, basitarsi, but I mean, that's not very important.
Okay, I'll put a persimillis up. How about that?
Okay.
All right, gotta make sure I put these in the right box. And here is persimillis. And should have a pretty good shot.
Okay, I'll be right. I got to step away for just 1 second, Sam. All right.
I'm taking this opportunity for those in the chat to do a last call on Augochlorella female questions.
And I can tell you that we'll show gratiosa too, but gratiosa has also been tricky for me in terms of seeing the hairs. All right.
All right, sorry.
That's okay. I'm still futzing here with the, I'm going to try and get it all the way up. All right, so here is persimillis. And I do think that sometimes they do have a lighter, whiter
That
leg.
one does for sure, yeah.
But here I may have to orient this a little bit different.
Yeah, most people
down.
Most people will not see that as being very different from aurata in that viewpoint. There you go.
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, if you notice the basal hairs are, well, basically they're hardly there. So there's the basal part of the hind basotarsus has extremely short hairs, and then the hairs beyond it are definitely much longer than any hairs at the base. And when you look, and they also have it's hard to describe it, but a flared out look, kind of. Once you've looked at a few of those, it's hard to describe, but you're getting there. You go. You're getting there.
Yeah, this is as much magnification as they can get out of this thing. But yeah, this is short. These are a little bit longer too, but that is another one of those things that you're not going to really able to determine that if you just have one specimen of one male of an Augochlorella. So, but also in the males, the propodial characters are usually there. I'm going to flip this specimen around here and see if we can quickly see that. Good to see that. That's the sort of key character anyway for females. And the more you look at it, the less mysterious, because you read like Mitchell, and I was like, what is he talking about? And so this was true on the other one. Here's the striation. This is the propodial triangle. Okay, these are the striations as per usual. And here's these bare areas. Really, they're very small. And then, you know, just to be a little bit confusing, almost always a couple central striations go all the way to, let's call it the rim. And we don't have enough definition here, I don't think. If you look really closely, there's micro striations or tessellations, and they almost always go in this direction. So the opposite direction of there. I can see that a lot of times, but it's not. And I think Mitchell mentioned that. I think it was Mitchell. But anyway, this is a pretty good sign. They're also golden and smaller. And then, so you have these combinations. Do you have anything else on the males here?
No, I think that's pretty good. And the color and the size is really distinctive enough that when you get a big box of Augochlorella from the east mixed together, you can really pull out by hand with a lot of reliability without a scope and separate those two species.
Yeah, and if you see something bigger, it's almost always an Augochlorella that you missed.
Right.
And we're not going to get into the details. We did cover that before, but you know, there's some pretty straightforward character differences between those two. Why don't I pull a gratiosa male here and move this one off the deck, and you can see what is, you know, appears to be a great characteristic, but you know, I would say when I am looking at specimens, I am getting, I am getting only 1 out of 200 might be a male in in my Augochlorella whatevers. So a lot of times I'm like,
No,
I'm not sure what I'm looking at. All right, so this is kind of an upside down. Let's see if I can, probably flipping it over is going to be better. Maybe. This has, am I looking at a middle leg there? Yeah, that's a middle leg. I think, let me go back to the other view there. You can see this, the really long, I think this will work. Oh, I can't get this to stay in view. Let's see if we can find the really
there you go.
Long hair there, yeah. And let's see if I can get up closer. Yeah, you've got legs crossing back and forth, but you can see, so here's these really long hairs at the base. And then you have some relatively long hairs in the same places before, but longer than aurata.
Yeah, and they progressively get, though subtly, shorter. And
yeah.
And another, if you, I don't know if you can see sternite 3 or not on this, but in gratiosa, the posterior margin of S3, sternite 3, is strongly, relatively strongly concave or incurved relative to aurata and persimillis.
But it should be pointed out that that is a character of the genus in general. That
yes, the incurved, yes, but it's particularly strong in gratiosa. But again, I guess if you didn't see the other two, you wouldn't necessarily know that. It's just sometimes legs are broken off. So you can, there you go, that's classic.
You can see that right there.
That's strong. You know, rarely will you see an aurata that looks like that.
Let me get this out of the way here. And try and play with the lighting so that maybe from this direction. It's hard because everything's dark.
I mean, I think that's clear.
Yeah.
Clear
There we go. That's quite, that is quite dipped. I actually hadn't noticed that one. That's a good one. Add that into the guide. So, okay. Do we have anything else we want to cover, Augochlorella wise? We could do.
Just in terms of habitat occurrences, and both aurata and persimillis are, you know, if any bee is a habitat generalist, it's those two. I mean, from cities to fields, I mean, they're just they're wetlands, prairies, they're all over the place.
I would say they're pretty much. Their role is taken over by Augochorella pura in woodlands. They can still show up anywhere.
Well, over in the Midwest, aurata is pretty common fairly common in woodlands, along with aurata. I mean, with pura. But these are more open woodlands, perhaps.
Yeah, right. So you have an understory that is blooming kind of throughout the year with goldenrods and asters still in there, whereas a lot of the mid-Atlantic and other, like, it's so dense that there's nothing left under there. I'm not even sure what Augochorella pura. I sometimes suspect that they're after honeydew in the woods, but I could be wrong. Hannula, the Forest Service guy, he might even be on this talk for all I know, but he did some canopy trapping in I'm going to say Piedmont, Georgia areas.
Yeah.
He found tons of Augochorella pura. That was the most common thing. Which, why is the question? But it's not for us. We're just doing IDs now. So I'm thinking that it might be, we have about 10 minutes left, so we really can't get deep into the Augochlorella. But Mike, why don't you just kind of describe the new things that are coming out of the Augochlorella groups?
Okay.
We'll talk about that next time with I've got specimens for all of them, I think. So
And maybe
but,
I can get.
Oh,
Maybe
I want to
get
give a
Zach.
quick chance for anybody who is not active in the chat to unmute and ask any questions, because I know not everybody has access to that. I don't have any questions though lined up in that or email at the moment. Could you repeat the name of the person that researched tree canopies? Is there a publication?
Yes. Sam, I forget the name.
I think we can try and dig that out. I think it's Hanula, Hanula. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I got a PDF of it.
Then there's Mike Ush. I'm good. Sorry, Mike, if you're online, but Usharen, I think he and Hanula did a lot of those things together. And of course, Mike, you and I have been looking at some really, really rare things from those canopy traps down in Georgia.
Yeah, and Rob Jean in Indiana has been doing a lot of canopy trapping in southern Indiana with blue vein traps raised up into the canopy level. And I know he's been finding some interesting things as well. So anyway, up to Augochorella, and again, Zach Portman at the University of Minnesota and I and other people as well have noticed. Sam noticed this. The current understanding of Augochorella in the East, let's say in the Mitchell sense, is about to change. We're going to propose some name changes and elevation of subspecies, et cetera, and it's well founded in morphology and distribution. The molecular data is, not entirely on board yet, but what we typically call sumptuosa, which is the big Augochorella in the East with largely a deep sand obligate, is really, we think, two species. An eastern form, which apparently doesn't get beyond the Appalachians as far as we know, and then a more western form that gets into the Great Plains and beyond, which we're going to propose the name Hemoralis for, which is an old name. And then what Mitchell called Augochorella metallica fulgida is clearly a separate species. Once you've looked at enough of them, it's quite different in males and females. So that will be elevated, but the name will probably change. Will change to Peridula. So there's going to be a bunch of name changes we propose, and Zach has done all the nitty-gritty holotype searching on this, and so I'm very grateful to him, and hopefully we can bring him in next week.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some big changes in Augochorella.
Yeah.
And not only that, but there's some unknown things down in Florida and along the Gulf Coast in Texas. We don't know what they are. We haven't seen enough specimens, but it's the biggest genus of the Augochlorines, I think, and over 100 species all the way down into South America. And no one's ever revised or even attempted to revise that group. So there's a potential for a lot more species along the southern border of the U.S. than we recognize.
Yeah, I think Mitchell did a bunch of work to try and stabilize things, because if you look under the synonymies for those,
yeah,
millions of them. So Zach really did a lot of work to try and resolve just which name should go which group. So this will be next week's task. I've got a lot of the specimens, and we'll go through the proposed ones, because I have examples of both the eastern and the western sumptuosa type things, and also the fulgida and metallica groups too. So is there anything else that people have questions about, or any other notions? I think this is probably a pretty good stopping place, before trying to jump off. You can see a picture of sumptuosa with its giant wings on its pronotocollar there, which, though, when you look at metallica, it also has pretty good size wings. So I know that when I started out, I called a bunch of Metallica sumptuosa
As
because
did
it was
I. Yep.
more wingy, and that's what the key said. But this species, this now what's calling the Eastern sumptuosa thing, is really uncommon. Like I'm think the only one that I have seen, I'd have to go back in my records, for real, has been down in the sandhills of North Carolina, and I didn't even collect that. So it's something that should be on people's radar to try and refine. Like I don't know, and maybe Mike, do you know about recent records from New Jersey or
They're all,
anywhere east?
yeah. I mean, I have not seen any recent.
Yeah.
Now for the Western one, Hemoralis, I mean, it's I don't want to say common, but you see deep sands
Yeah.
west of the Appalachians, it's going to be there.
Yeah, I've got them from Nebraska,
Yep.
just on a family reunion. So
Yeah.
something to do with the family reunion, you know. Claire, do we have any questions or anything going on in the chat?
We don't have anything in the chat. Nope, I have an email, but it's not this right now, though I will respond to you. I have taken a lot of pictures today, so I will post those in the pictures place on the Teams. If you have not noticed, if you don't use our Teams for the recordings, I have reorganized that a little bit to separate genus from these in-depth species, species reviews, and I don't know how I might do something similar for the photos, but just keep an eye on that. Oh, we just got a question.
And I hope we're not scaring everybody.
Sam, I'm sorry if I don't know if you wanted me to read this out loud, but have you received emails from Christine Favorito? And if you haven't, I'm inviting Christine to also send them to me, and I can maybe help you or nudge on that.
On about what?
I'm just gonna read this.
Sorry, Christina, I hope this. There's a couple people visiting next week or the week after the lab, and I want to say it could be Christine.
Yeah, sorry. Next week. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was all set before I set off.
Yeah, you're on my calendar, but and I'm behind on I'm way behind on emails. So send me another email today and about what your exact plans are, so that and did I send you directions? Just let me know what your plans are. We'll go back and forth to figure out how to get you to the lab somehow.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And thanks for the reminder.
Okay, it's 2 o'clock and there's nothing happening.
All right.
So you guys are incredible instructors.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
We're trying.
Clearly it worked out today. I'm going to stop the recording. We're always here for another couple minutes if anything comes up.